Senate will please come to order. We'll begin this evening with a brief moment of silence in lieu of a devotional. Thank you. Are there any announcements as we begin this evening? Seeing none, hearing none, this brings us right into the order today. We will begin with H716 request. We have on the calendar for third reading H716, an act relating to making miscellaneous changes in education law. Was ordered on May 9th. Are there any amendments before third reading? The third reading of H716.
H716, an act relating to making miscellaneous changes in education law.
You've heard the third reading. The question now is, shall the bill pass in concurrence? Are you ready for the question? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you've passed H716 in concurrence. We'll now move back to the top of the calendar, and what I will do, as I did this morning, is reference the bill taken up and then give a moment of pause for any requests to pass over. So H737. Senator from Wyndham is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. We're going to pass over this at this time.
S33. Senator from Chittenden is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. I don't see my chair, but as the reporter of the bill, I don't believe we've had time to consider it in committee. Would ask it be passed over.
Madam President, we need to pass it. It's still in finance.
Oh, it's in finance. Okay.
S234.
Madam President, I would ask to pass over.
H716, we just completed. H175. Okay, we have on the calendar for action H175, an act relating to the beverage container redemption system. It was read for the first time on April 21st. It was referred to the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy, which reports that the bill be amended as set forth on pages 5264 to 5277 of today's calendar, and that when so amended, the bill ought to pass. The bill was then referred to the Committee on Finance, which reports it has considered the bill and recommends that when so amended as recommended by the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy, the bill ought to pass. Finally, the bill was then referred to the Committee on Appropriations, which considered the bill and recommends that when so amended as recommended by the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of 170.
H175, an act relating to the beverage container redemption system.
The senator from Addison, Senator Gray, is recognized for the report of the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy. Kindly unmute, Senator.
Thank you, Madam President. Again, I'm reporting H175, an act relating to the beverage container redemption system. And the bill appears in today's calendar beginning on page 5264. So, but looking forward to this report because it's been an interesting and challenging project to bring this forward. The bottle bill is 50 years old, and everyone knows it well, or feels as though they know it well. Depending on who you're talking to, they have very different impressions. It reminds me a little of the story of the three blind men and the elephant. One is a trunk, it's the animals like a snake, the other is an ear, it's like a leaf, and the third touches a leg, and it's if you're talking to retailers versus material recycling facilities versus customers, you get very different impressions. But the most important ones, I think, are the Vermonters at a rate of 88% support expansion of the program, support the current program, and 83% support expansion. I think it simply has confused people for years by beverages that seem very similar to one another. One will have the deposit on it, and because they turn through that bottle redemption system, and another will not. The point of the system is to ensure that we deal with the waste that's created by commercial products successfully at the end of their life. In other words, that we take a valuable material, a valuable container, and make the best possible use of it, as opposed to avoid having it turn out into trash and end up in the landfill. One of the biggest changes that's happened in the last 50 years since the bottle was introduced is the expansion of the number of things you can buy in the store. There's been it's familiar with the fact that there are now aisles and aisles of beverages, all types that we never used to be able to buy. Almost all of them have come online and been outside the bottle. So the goal of this bill is to increase the efficiency of the overall system, improve its performance, to rationalize its performance by eliminating sort of hodgepodge of what's in and what's out, and to make it more comprehensive. And just one quick note on the expansion of how many things has been introduced to the marketplace without being brought into the system. 46% of beverage containers sold in Vermont are covered by our current system. And if you look at Maine, which has a list of products that's much more like what we're proposing in this bill, the rate is 91%. So we're missing a great deal of, again, valuable material that has the environmental cost in terms of it being produced, issues related to the energy that goes to produce those pristine containers, and then the loss of value when they end up being landfilled, which are relatively high rate compared to the potential for them to be turned into something useful again, as in a bottle becoming bottled. So I will turn to the bill and walk through the provisions of the bill. The House sent a bill that expanded the scope of what was covered, but in the testimony, we quickly discovered that although many people were thinking of expanding the scope of the bill, there was a great deal of concern about how well the current system ran. In fact, it was recommended that we not expand the bill unless we address its current shortcomings. So, for instance, we heard from the Vermont Retailers and Grocers Association in terms of their members being dissatisfied with the current system. So, in their own survey, 97% of respondents agreed that the mechanism that is the current beverage redemption center in Vermont needs to be fixed systematically. And what we're offering in H175, with the second strike law, is a systematic top-to-bottom rewrite of the bottom. So I'm going to turn now to the slides again on page 264. So one of the first things that happens is that we redefine what we mean by beverage. research in order to bring more materials into the program. You'll see the list of it's all drinks in liquid form intended for human consumption, so they're very broad definition. Except for milk, dairy products, plant-based beverages, formula, meal replacement drinks, and non-alcoholic cider, beer, wine, and glass containers. That last one, wine and glass containers, we'll be offering an amendment to address that category. I'll just flag as we go by that wine bottles have been outside the system since its inception, and they constitute one of the challenges to the current system because they are heavy and they're not addressed by the plans. So reading on down through the definitions, container we have a new definition of container. It includes, excludes some things, for instance, containers greater than 2.5 liters, too large, or the volume greater than 2 liters. This and boxes of beverages that then we made cool food bottom program, just to cover a couple of key definitions. So the distributor, anyone who engages in the sale of consumer products and containers here in this state. So, manufacturers, different bottle, canning, packing, or otherwise filling containers for sale. The manufacturers and distributors both are involved and will have an obligation to participate in the model program. Going on to 1522 on the bottom of 35265 is the existing law around the deposit, which is currently liquid greater than 15 cents on beverages for spirits. That remains unchanged by the bill. In the next section, 1522A, there are rules that is no longer apply, and so the capacity that is deleted. 1523, we go on to acceptance of beverage containers. So who will have an obligation to accept containers? We modify the current law. What do we, I think probably for the top of page 5, 2, 6, 7, you'll see a third provision that addresses concerns we heard between smaller retailers who find it burdensome to yield the return bottles. They currently have an obligation to accept the bottles or containers of any product they sell in the store that has a deposit on them. But smaller stores can have trouble finding enough space to handle it. And particularly if when we expand the program, then the space requirements could become even larger theoretically than it might be more burdensome. So right now the bill allows retailers less than 5,000 square feet to opt out. Then we get to 1524, labeling. So this is the first language here is very familiar language, but there is the Vermont and the deposits information on it that we've all seen many, many times. We move on to 1528 on page 52 to 68, and we get the beverage registration. So we start registering products going forward. Every product sold in the city has to be registered, and one of the points of this registration is that it allows us to create a system in which every registered product also includes a universal pricing code, so a barcode, and that's going to provide an automated sorting of materials, which will create, particularly with volume, through economies of scale, and help us address the current awkwardness of the system, the current system, which involves still a great deal of hand sorting. For instance, community leadership is the third largest redemption center in the state of Vermont, and traced it from the door right out through to where they load it out on the trucks to take the bottles away. And they handle bottles no less than 6 times in that process. So it is very labor intensive, and that makes it expensive and awkward for even those who want to participate. Going on to 1531, we create a manufacturer participation in producer responsibility organization. So we say, if you're manufacturing or distributing beverages in the state, you must participate in a producer responsibility organization. In other words, it's like a owners group. We already have these people are familiar, even if we don't necessarily use the term. All of us are familiar with, in the case of batteries, in the case of waste, in the case of light bulbs. We have an obligation to those creating those products to help address dealing with them at the end of the useful lifespan. This is, I think, a case of where we want to go upstream to the source of the material that is becoming a problem in our solid waste system and engage the producers of that solid waste and say, you will have an obligation going forward to helping solve the waste problem that your products end up creating. They are the most knowledgeable and the most motivated parties to help address those products. They might change the product or the packaging or any other feature in order to make it more readily recyclable. They might use recycled content in the product. There are many things they can do. We need to go upstream to those creating the products, not just try to address cleaning up after the system once a consumer is tossing out something. So we created by January 1, 2023, manufacturers joined a producer responsibility organization, and that organization is approved by the Secretary of Natural Resources. If no producer responsibility organizations form and come forward, then the state comes forward and organizes such a program for itself. In 1532 on page 5270, we define the minimum requirements of a plan, and these address many of the concerns we heard. So I'm going to go through some of them because they are important to addressing, again, the problems we heard as we took a great deal of efforts and also spend time in the field of visiting sites. So number one is convenience of collection. We heard repeatedly that we want to make sure that it's easy to quote unquote do the right thing. So we work on making it convenient. There are features here that help us do this. For instance, we said, hey, that at least 3 points of redemption per county must be provided by a PRO. In a municipality with 7,000 or more persons, there must be such a facility. Points of coverage for redemption should not be more than 15 minutes away from any particular location unless a waiver is granted by the Secretary. Secondly, we get into relationships between all the partners who are in the system. So there's fair operation and compensation of redemption centers. Redemption centers, we hope and expect to be a profitable operation and people want to be in the business there. So we talk about how the system should be fair, there shouldn't be barriers to participation, and the plan shall describe how managing and storing containers will be minimized. In other words, we're trying to streamline operations. In 3, on the top of page 5271, we talked about impacts to municipal recycling. So we're talking about making sure that whatever we're doing in the bottle bill does not have an unintended adverse consequence on municipalities that already have an obligation to deal with solid waste. And we'll be coming back to this section here and making an amendment in the amendments we offered. Education to consumers. Obviously, just like when we did the practice, we switched to no longer using single-use plastic bags. We did considerable consumer outreach, and that made that transition, which happened in October, a year and a half to lay that out. It happened almost without a hiccup. So we're counting on the importance of outreach. Number 5, consultation with stakeholders. It's important that everyone who already is in this overall system of retailers, customers, solid waste handlers, runners, etc., all contribute fairly, and so there's a consultation process that they will make sure that everyone has a seat at the table to discuss their points of view as the system is worked out. B, we get into reporting so that we, in the legislature, have the ability, and the secretary have the ability to observe the operations of the system and have the ability then to modify the program. I'm going ahead to 1533 and 5273. Of course, we want to operate this in a manner that is fair and transparent and fiscally sound. So there is an entire program audit in sub A every 5 years conducted by an independent third-party program auditor. And in sub B, there's a fiscal audit, which is annual. And that's to make sure that the producer responsibility, the organization, its expenditures, the number of beverage containers collected, the amount of liquid deposits are all verified by an independent third-party audit. In 1534, we talk about goals for the program. So stepping back away from operational details, our goal right now we need about 75% of the containers covered. We could do substantially better and deliver benefits to the launchers by doing that. Again, landfill space is precious and expensive. Here themselves that are containers have value in it, and it is a loss in terms of energy and in terms of environmental impacts. Let that turn into trash rather than turn into something useful. So we named a series of goals for improving the performance of the modified system, and there's a report back so that we can monitor that performance and consider whether or not the deposit ought to be altered. There was discussion around should a nickel become a dime. If that nickel from 1972 were adjusted for inflation, it would be about 34 cents right now. So that is one of the challenges with the current bill, is that the motivation to return is perhaps too little with the nickel, but we don't want to change that part of the system while we're reforming both in. We do want to leave that as an open question so that the future legislature can reassess and make that adjustment if it deems appropriate in order to help increase regulation. In section 1535, rule making is provided for. And in section 4, we get into type 3 procedures. So this is not so very user-friendly really for notice and comment processes that are used by the Agency of Natural Resources to reach out to the public and let them know about the rulemaking process that we're talking about in the preceding section. The reason for choosing this is Section 74, where you see that we use the same type 3 notice and comment strategies that are related to these. For instance, we see a primary battery stewardship plan under Section 586. Public meetings are noted under 5274. This brings us into Section 5, page 5275, where we talk about the clean water fund. So I won't go through this in detail because I think the Appropriations Committee may want to address the money handling features, but in short, what we say is the SGs that we currently receive, that is nickels or bottles never redeemed, now revert to the state and they're applied to the clean water fund. At the time when we made these 17 between sheet, the request of Lieutenant Natural was to apply those, that new revenue to helping build the solid waste system. That year, the request made in the legislature to do was investment in water. So that's where the money went. Where what we do now is to say that we propose splitting the sheets, with 50% being retained by the producer responsibility organization to fund its startup costs. But that after 5 years, that those monies should be put back to the state. And then be split thereafter to deal both with solid waste and the water once again. In section 7, the top of 5276, on or before January 15, 2028, there's a systems analysis. So let me pause, that's a date that's pretty far off, and let me talk just a little bit about dates created. That systems analysis comes in 2028 because there is a 3-step process proposed by the bill and the amendment that will be offered shortly. It says in 2024, the PRO is the producer responsibility organization is established and set up and running. The number and type of containers that it will be responsible for does not change in the current bottle bill. In other words, we keep the member, it's just as though the current bottle bill operates, but now the obligation to address those materials falls to the PRO. So that's to allow them to operate that system for 9 months with no increased volume, and basically to hit their sea level. By January of 2025, after their 9 months experience, then we increase the scope of the containers that defined in the beverages section and you'll see in the amendment to come that in 2026 we propose bringing wine and glass bottles into the bill a year later. Those have been flagged many times over as a relatively low value, high cost material to deal with. And so we're, if you might regard it as one of the bigger nuts to crack. So what we're doing is letting the system that we've been running for almost 2 years before wine would come into the system. That brings us to section 8 of the beverage container implementation study. So on before January 15, 2023, we hear a report back from the Secretary of State on the file. One, recommendations on whether a minimum size limit or should be, this will be changed from minimum to minimum and maximum. Size limit should be included. So you may have heard some people want to make sure that the very small bottles, they're different names, nips or shots, whatever you call them, they're very small liquor containers that are available should also be vetted by the system. On the other end of the spectrum, there's some very large containers, and we want to make sure that they are, the system is capable of dealing with larger containers. The second recommendation, which will also be amended, talks about handling of wine bottles. So because this is about to be replaced, I don't spend more time on the report. In section 9, it agrees to effective dates, and it's a relatively long effective dates, but the expansion, the first date is on the key dates. You'll see that it's January 1, 2025. That's where those full expansion of the 5-year mentioned over the deal with all the then in 2, you'll see a date of March 2024. That's when products must be registered, and that's in order to allow the PRO to stand up and begin operating 9 months in advance of the expanding definition. In section 5 dates of these effective dates. You'll see a date of 2025. That's for the remittance of the sheets, stops reverting to the state of clean water fund. And then it's out by July 1, 30 date when they revert. And then in 2030, finally, one of the last things is we stand up a waste management assistance fund going forward. So that is the bill. The committee vote was 5-0-0. Because the witnesses, I'm happy to provide more details on that. And when the time is appropriate, I want to offer an amendment to the bill I just walked through. But again, I would say that what we're doing overall is taking a system that has not changed in 50 years virtually, and in a time where costs have increased, technology has improved, and the number of products has expanded in a vast way, and providing a mechanism to knit together a comprehensive system designed to evolve and handle waste in a more productive, more efficient, more costly way. I don't know if I should say for the next 50 years, but certainly for decades to come. It puts us in a much better posture for moving forward. And with that, Madam President, I complete the committee's report on the underlying on our strike all of it.
Senator from Chittenden, Senator Pearson is recognized for the report of the Committee on Finance.
Thank you, Madam President. When it comes to the bottle bill, state revenues all flow through the sheets. So that is the nickels that are not claimed. And so as the presenter was just explaining, there is some timeline that is worth understanding to understand the impact on revenue. So beginning in January 2025, the universe of what is required to have a deposit expands greatly. And at that point, the design is to give 50% of the sheets, unclaimed nickels, to the producers, so to the people that are actually handling the empties, so they can develop their transition and have some assistance to make that transition. So at that point, we expect a small hit to the revenue of the state in that initial first half fiscal year, $175,000, and then for the next 4 years, a total of $700,000. That's because half of the money is held by the handlers, and of course, JFO acknowledged this was hard to predict because you never know what percentage will be redeemed, and we're seeing a huge expansion of the universe here. But by FY32, we were convinced the state was breaking even, and in fact, well on its way to, had broken even, in other words, made up for the loss, and then seeing enhanced revenue. Just for some perspective, at the full year hit, $700,000, that is does come out of the Clean Water Fund, but the sheets currently contribute about $3.1 million to the sheets. So it's less than a 25% of that. And just to remind senators, on average, our Clean Water Fund is about $20 to $24 million. So a small portion of the money that's coming in via the sheets will be lost for a few years, and then by about FY32, we are up and running, and reclaimed that loss and likely to come out ahead as the universe is greatly expanded. Senate Finance voted 7-0 to support the construct that came to us from Senate Natural Resources, and would ask the Senate to support.
The Senator from Windsor, Senator Nitka, is recognized for the report of the Committee on Appropriations.
Madam President, the Appropriations Committee met and considered H-175. There is no recommendation in the bill, and the committee makes no recommendation. Vote in the committee was 6-0-1. Thank you.
There is an amendment for consideration. I am going to ask the senator from Addison to clarify one point. The senator, there is an amendment on 5277 of today's calendar, but my understanding is that there is also a handout amendment, and the handout may include the calendar amendment. Which would you like to take up?
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to take up the amendment that is now in the committee, not in the calendar. As you say, it includes what's in the calendar and some additional information. And just to ensure that we're all looking at the very same amendments,
Hand it out. Yeah, I would not give the number. We're handing it out right now, Senator. So the calendar amendments offered by Senator Bray circulated presently. So the senator from Addison is now recognized for the amendment.
Now we're going actually to the 17th alternate in the corner. So we're proposing 4 amendments bill. In the first instance, on page 1, we address the definition of beverage as and just pointing out that the list of beverages covered now removes the exception for wine in glass bottles, and now moves it down to 7C in the middle of the page. So not a single definition. Beverage does not include mixed beverages until January 1, 2026. So it was a conclusion that based on a necessity to really make the bottle bill whole, you could not ignore wine bottles, which were one of the problematic aspects of the current system to many, especially to many retailers who were contemplating having very big bottles to change them. And so we wanted to bring them into the system and address them in a manner that would be successful for all parties. Because in law, cider is categorized as a mixed beverage. We specified below in 12 that cider, however, is included. And that addresses the sort of confounding thing for these people that they might buy a can of beer and then a can of cider. They're almost indistinguishable from one another. One carries the deposit and the other doesn't. So we're bringing canned cider explicitly in the program to make it more, handling of those more consistent with other beverages. And honestly, to me, consumer expectations, these things are so similar, they ought to be handled this way. The second instance of amendments on page 2. Again, we were concerned with logistics and fair play, transparency, and seeing the system succeed. So we heard concerns from Miscellaneous Cypress about what might happen to them if materials that they were receiving shifted over to the bottle redemption system. So we modified the reporting requirement and to say that the plan shall propose a protocol for documenting the amount of bottled materials that are processed and marketed by solid waste management entities, including at materials recovery facilities, and shall propose a compensation formula for glass, plastic, and aluminum covered beverage containers that are made usable or recyclable commodities. So that was addressed their concern that the bottle will not overlook in any way the impact on their operations. Third, we altered the beverage container studies that we built. So the data is saying, this is the third instance of amendment, here's the bottom page 2, The study that is in January of 2023 now includes, one, the recommendation on whether minimum or maximum size limits should be reviewed in the system. Two, a recommendation on the amount of a deposit for line, so the line is in, how much value should be set. Two obvious choices are in front of us. Liquor bottles, for instance, have 15 cents, a soda as a nickel. So we want to have it as mentioned. We want to figure out what makes sense for the deposit system. Three, a summary of the logistical and financial impacts of wine bottles on the operation of the beverage container deposit redemption system and its resulting infrastructure. Four, recommended strategies to aid the development markets for these recycled glass. So we not only want to be collecting glass in clean form at a higher rate, we also want to look for opportunities to make better use of that material. And then B, the Secretary of Natural Resources shall convey the stakeholder process and processes for developing recommendations as required by us. And it shall include all current stakeholders in the bottle redemption system, as well as those in the non-bottle redemption system. So it is an open field and all stakeholders are invited. That brings us to the first instance of amendments, and that is, Chairman already pointed out, the flaw in the dating of the effective date section, and this fixes the date upon which the sheets we start to return the sheets rather than to the research responses of the workers. I'll just say in passing that since we proposed that amendment, I've heard from three different materials, municipalities with management systems, thanking us for those changes, moving around that position of being able to support the bill as amended. So with that, I would ask that the Senate support this additional amendment to page 175.
The question is, shall the report of the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy be amended as moved by the Senator from Addison and others? Are you ready for the question? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
No.
Ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you've amended the proposal of amendment as proposed by the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy. The question now is, shall the Senate propose the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy as amended? The Senator from Franklin is recognized, and I'll move to the Senator from Rutland.
Thank you, Madam President. I wonder, Madam President, if you're familiar with a Rube Goldberg machine. And if the body and the President are not familiar with the machine, it is a machine that does overly complex things. A classic example would be a machine made of a tomato plant that falls on a fulcrum that deals with a spring that causes the hammer to fall and hit a rooster in the chicken house in the head. The rooster squawks, scares the cow. The cow kicks over a bucket of water, and the water provides nourishment to the tomato plant, which produces more tomatoes that fall and hit the fulcrum and over and over. As I look at this beverage redemption system, it reminds me a lot of the Rube Goldberg machine that you see in the cartoons of old. 50 years ago, we created this beverage system. And it was great then because we didn't have things like single stream recycling. And we did it, among other things, in order to ensure that our roads and highways were not filled with bottles. I live on a state highway in Swanton, and I could establish another category of my tax return to deal with the amount of money that I get back from bottles and cans that I find on my roadside every week. In 35 years, I've never found a wine bottle, not one, on my lawn. I rarely find water bottles. What I find are beer bottles. And it's the beer bottles of the kid who buys beer someplace and doesn't want to have the beer when he or she comes home to the parents. Those are among other things. And of course, then people who are basically sloppy, who throw things out of the window of their car while driving. Those never make it to the redemption center except when I take them. And I think about the purpose of this bill, among other things, it's obviously to save carbon, to make sure the environment is clean. Well, it takes me collecting those bottles and cans, as well as those that we use, to go to the redemption center, and the nearest redemption center for me is 3 miles away. So that's a 6-mile round trip every year, or every week. Now, a few years ago, we did a compost to that. I don't have anybody to pick up my compost. The last time I did a compost heap, I found that I created a home for a family of coyotes, so I don't have a compost heap anymore. And so I take that to another place that collects compost. That's also 3 miles away from me, but in the opposite direction. So each of those round trips is 6 miles per week, times 2, that's 12 miles per week that I have to drive. And every time I drive, I add carbon to the atmosphere. And as we talk about all of these savings, we never think about or never talk about how much it costs people to participate in these programs. Now, that cost to me, every car mile that you drive consumes by counts that at least I have 411 grams of carbon. Now, if I multiply that 12 miles a week times 52 weeks per year times 411 grams of carbon, by the time I get done, I've used about a metric ton of carbon every year, just taking the bottles and compost to where I'm told to take it. I look at this bill here and it reminds me of the kind of thing that you always see in government. You know, in government, just like in the medical profession, what you hope to say is do no harm. And I look at the amount of carbon that I'm emitted and I multiply that by the thousands of Vermonters who have to do what I do, because there's no convenient way to get rid of this stuff unless you have to take it someplace. And there's a cost, there's a time, there's an effort to do that. Now, when I look at this, I see a system that not only requires me to take this stuff in and take the stuff to different places, but it then adds a variety of additional operating systems and costs in terms of handling, in terms of reports, in terms of audits, in terms of all kinds of things that have to be done, as well as it creates an industry to do something that duplicates what somebody else already does. Because I already have this truck that comes to my house to handle recycling, but it doesn't handle any of this stuff because we don't let it. This to me makes no sense. This is costly, and there is that fundamental thing that we are not counting is what it costs us and what it costs the environment to do all of this handling and so on that we do, not to mention our time, which is probably the most valuable commodity of all. I don't think this is a good bill. I don't think this is a bill that should pass. I think we should take a pass on this bill and step back and look at what the alternatives are and whether or not a form of single cycle recycling. And I don't by any means suggest that one company or one provider ought to be the one to do it. But just because we started this 50 years ago doesn't mean we need to continue it if it doesn't make any sense. And it also may be harming the environment even more. And as you add the trucks and so on to this producer responsibility system that gets added, we're adding more and more trucks to the road to handle the same pieces over and over again. I just don't think this makes any sense. And I will be voting against this bill, Madam President. Thank you.
I believe the senator from Rutland was standing, and I'll recognize the senator from Wyndham.
Thank you, Madam President. May I interrogate the reporter of the underlying bill?
You may.
Thank you. So I'm looking at page 5270 in today's calendar, and the bill talks about the convenience of collection and says that there should be 3 points of redemption per county and at least 1 point per municipality. And then it says in subdivision C, there should be a statewide coverage of points of redemption so that consumers are not required to drive more than 15 minutes unless a waiver is granted by the secretary. And I wonder if the committee had any testimony or estimate as to how many points of redemption could that mean statewide?
We don't have I would say we do not have a figure on how many leadership points that we need. There is also that provision that the secretary may waive the requirement. It could be there are parts of the state, for instance, that are very sparsely populated where you might not find a redemption center within 15 minutes.
I appreciate the answer.
We don't know. The system has not yet been designed.
Okay. Thank you, Madam President. And I appreciate the answer, but I'm curious why it wasn't 20 minutes or 25. In other words, 15 minutes was selected as a demarcation level, and I didn't know how that came about.
Sure. Thank you for the question. There was a working group that created the request of the committee, chaired by the director of the Solid Waste Division of the Department of Environmental Conservation of A&R. That working group came back with a 15-minute recommendation.
Thank you, Senator. So again, just to be clear, we haven't decided how many points of redemption there will be. That will be something that will be worked out. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. The senior senator from Franklin has already referenced my next point. It seems to me that there will be an increased number of trucks running around the state, picking bottles and cans up and bringing them to a recycling center. And did the committee consider the impact on the carbon footprint that might introduce?
Madam President, I just want to make sure I understand the question. An increased number of trucks, are we talking about consumers of beverages bringing their beverage containers back to a redemption center, or what kind of trucks are we? I don't know what trucks doing what they're talking about.
Well, Madam, I'm thinking of the consumer will bring whatever he or she has to a redemption center. The redemption center will then bring whatever's brought to it, I assume, to a recycling center.
Okay. So we currently have, the question is, whose trucks doing what and how efficiently are they organized? There are already trucks traveling, picking up materials, moving them around. And the goal of this bill is to look for economies of scale and efficiencies. We haven't talked about it much here in more detail, but when we visited more advanced centers, they have equipment that sorts by a barcode, for instance, and crushes or shreds the container, and it takes a single cube, it fills a cube, open-ended cube, that's roughly 5 by 5 by 5, and it can hold 10,000 of these containers. In the current system, nothing is crushed. It's just they're maintained full size, and it takes a tractor trailer load hauling around. It fills a tractor trailer load that is mostly space because of these large bottles. So it's obviously very efficient. Say, why would you haul so much air around? So there are some large opportunities to use smarter approaches to handling materials and then reducing the number of trucks that move because the loads will be much more compact.
I appreciate the answer, Madam President. I was wondering also, it seems only logical that there will be an additional cost to perform the provisions in this bill. Did the committee think about what the overall cost might be to Vermonters who are going to continue to purchase bottles and cans?
Sure, I'm going to see if I can find it quickly in the bill, which I'm looking at online, so it's a little bit of a challenge while talking. There is a section 7 on page 576 includes a system analysis of beverage container system. So which includes a written report on the total system costs associated with the implementation of the beverage container system in this chapter, including climate change. So the Senator from Franklin's concerns, which I appreciate, about not increasing greenhouse gas emissions into return bottles. This will be analyzed as well. I think the simple answer to those sorts of issues is we've all learned to combine trips so that one outing includes multiple stops and it might include buying bottles as well as going grocery shopping.
Isn't it true, though, that that report isn't due until January of 2028?
That is correct, because the new program doesn't go live until 2025. And bottles, wine bottles don't come until 2026. So the point of the report at that point is to have let the system get up and running and analyze those costs. Although the implementation study that I mentioned earlier that's offered in the Amended today addressed costs as well for all stakeholders.
So in essence, we don't know what the overall impact to Vermonters will be in terms of immediate costs, Madam President.
We do not. I mean, to change the entire system, we have seen instances where people have modernized their facilities to automate, and they're finding that their technology investments are paid back in 5 years or less, even at current volumes. Those folks were very encouraging about moving forward because they have the capacity to deal with roughly triple the volume, which is what the bill would do by bringing in more types of containers. So as with many of these things, there's economies of scale, there's evolving technologies, they're honestly based on observation of other jurisdictions that have more modern approaches to handling the deposit system. They're seeing economies of scale and savings. We're not selling the program based on anticipated savings, but they well might be achieved.
And Madam President, when the reporter listed the witnesses that the committee heard from, I'm assuming that the testimony was taken from those who handle these products on an everyday basis, retailers and redemption centers and recycling facilities. Can you just characterize how people on that side of it feel about the bill?
So I think, can you give me those categories, sort of one by one? There is a challenge here, and that is that because we continued in conversation with parties, today's amendment, for instance, has changed the position of a number of operators. For instance, just today we received emails from folks operating they're often referred to as SWMEs, solid waste management entities. So that's MRFs and collection centers owned and operated by municipalities. They have been concerned about possible impacts related to glass bottles and ended up writing in support of the bill once we had made that final round of changes. So if I may, Madam President, I'd like to quote from John Lenny, who is the executive director of the Northwest Vermont Solid Waste Management District. The amendment language that you suggest is appreciated and a great improvement to H175. The inclusion of all glass beverage containers is a huge improvement. I believe the language around the impacts to the municipal system and the development of a protocol to document bottle bill of materials that are processed by the municipal system is also much clearer than previous versions. As I've shared this with the Vermont Solid Waste District Managers Association, I've received some comments from many who support these changes. However, there were still some concerns from a few members of the group. So I don't want to say it's universal, but I received other emails also supportive. And for the remaining concerns, I think they are relatively modest, and the stakeholder groups that are established within the bill will have ample opportunity to address any possible shortcomings. And again, I want to remind people how long the ramp into this change is. So there's development from now through March of 2024 is the initial implementation without an expanded beverage list. Then they go to the expanded beverage list on January 1, 2025, and finally we bring wine bottles in 2026. So here's our hope and expectation that just as when we did a long, steady build out for the transition away from using single-use plastic bags, we went in, we've seen it, we've succeeded, and we've reduced the we're anticipating the same kind of positive response. Again, Vermonters at the rate of 88% like the bottle bill and want to see it modernized.
I thank the senator very much. Thank you, Madam President.
The senator from Wyndham is recognized, and then I'll recognize the senator from Orange.
Thank you, Madam President. I must admit that I'm having a hard time wrapping my little mind around this, what I consider a fairly complex system. I didn't think of it quite as complex as the senator from Franklin, but I am having a hard time wrapping my mind around it. And my guess is that if you ask a Vermonter if they agree that the bottle bill works and we should expand it, what they thought was, yes, let's put it on more of those bottles. Let's put that 5-cent deposit on more of those bottles. That's the expansion of the bottle bill. I don't think 85% of Vermonters anticipated this very complex system that's being established. And I admit that I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around it. But I can comment on just one little thing, and this is just one little part of it that struck me, and I thought, wow, if the whole thing is this complicated, I'm really lost. So, 15 minutes to drive to a redemption center. I live in a fairly populated part of the state. We have a lot of roads, we have a lot of towns, we have a lot of little village centers. We built a house on top of a mountain. It took us 15 minutes to get to the main road. Now, we are going to guarantee that people don't have to drive more than 15 minutes to turn in their bottles. I had to drive more than 15 minutes to buy the bottle in the first place, but now I don't have to drive more than 15 minutes to return it. We won't guarantee that people can only drive 15 minutes to a grocery store to get good, nutritious food, and yet we're going to say that we're going to guarantee that they don't have to drive more than 15 minutes to return a bottle that they had to buy 30 minutes away from their house. So I think this is a very, very complex bill, and I actually hate to admit it, but I am going to vote against it.
Senator from Orange is recognized.
Madam President, this is a complex bill. Bottle redemption used to be really simple and used a lot of trucks. So, Madam President, let's talk about trucks for a minute. When the bottle bill passed 50 years ago, Pepsi delivered its bottles, it picked up its empties. Coke delivered its bottles, it picked up its empties. Budweiser delivered its bottles, it picked up its empties. And they figured out that, well, that wasn't complex, Madam President. That was duplicative and unnecessary. So what they did was they began to consolidate where one truck picked up the bottles for all the deliveries. That has continued to this day and gets refined as more and more different producers sell bottles. The number of trucks per bottle has been reduced and will continue to be reduced. The senator from Franklin poses a perfectly reasonable question. If you drive 3 miles and drive back, taking a case of bottles or cans for redemption, if this bill passes, you would perhaps drive the same number of miles. You'd have more cans in the car. But when you went to the transfer station or what we used to call the dump, you'd have less bottles and cans in the car. Which brings us back, Madam President, to trucks. if you use single sort. The containers get picked up, put in a truck, and sent somewhere. And now when it comes to recycling them and selling them, whole bunches, and I hope the chair will do better than myself in the percents, of those deliveries are found to be contaminated and unavailable for recycling, dirty, or not eligible, in which case another truck takes them to newly constructed landfills that the taxpayers have to build and construct to put those containers under the ground at more expense than it would have been had they been clean and sent in consolidated trucks back to recycling. The reporter of the bill mentioned machines that crush bottles and cans, and he may give us more details about that, but we've had testimony in the committee that there are enterprises who wish to devote themselves to only collecting bottles and cans. So you don't have to pull in the back and be let in at the convenience of the seller, but you get to take your stuff in the front door. Those facilities already, as have some supermarkets, told us they would consider investing, and some said they would purchase machines where you can dump entire containers of cans into the machines. They would read the barcodes, crush the cans, and suddenly something that was this big becomes that big, and you can fit 10 times as many of them into a single truck. Fewer trucks. This is complex. The option when you don't recycle clean cans in fewer trucks, which this bill will result in, is that you send more to landfills. The minute you send them to landfills, the taxpayer has to build the landfills quickly. The questions that have been asked by the senators about trucks are perfectly valid, but this is a truck reduction bill. And if you go to your recycling center and drop off containers and trash, and then drive to a bottle redemption center today, you still might go to the recycling center with slightly less and go to the bottle redemption center with slightly more, but it's the same number of trips. Probably had a couple other things to say, but if I tried to do that, I'd be repeating myself. So perhaps the reporter will also can mention how taking fewer trucks with cleaner materials enhances the ability to earn money from recycling, and how prices have changed when you provide large volumes of bottles and cans for recycling. Thank you, Madam President.
Unless you're asking to inquire of the reporter, I could go wait for the reporter to request recognized. The senator from Addison is recognized, and then I'll move to the senator from Washington.
Thank you, Madam President. My colleagues who've spoken have talked about the systems that are involved in this bill and transportation routes and all of the complexities of the bill. But for me, this bill actually reminds me about Vermonters and the people that we're here to serve. And particularly one Vermonter in particular, who the Senate Health Natural Resources Committee was kind enough to hear from. It's my constituent Henry from Salisbury, and he loves this bill. He loves bottle redemption and picking up bottles and cans from the roadside. He's retired. He's a military veteran. He worked for 40 plus years in the farming on farms and tractor supply stores. And now he pretty much devotes his life when he has free time to picking up bottles and cans on the roadside. And he has for the past 3 years dogged me constantly. Ruth, when is this bill going to pass? When are we going to expand the number of bottles that can be redeemed so that when I collect bottles, I can take more in and get more money for my efforts to keep our beautiful state clean. He loves Vermont. He is what many people love to claim, a native Vermonter, and he loves this state and he loves to be able to keep our roadsides clean. And he wants us to pass a bill that will provide more incentives for more people to do what he does. During the pandemic, when he had even more time to go collect bottles and cans from the roadside, he called me up and he said, Ruth, I collected enough bottles. And he, by the way, keeps handwritten logs of every bottle and can he redeems and what kind of category it comes from. So he can tell you who throws out what on the roadsides of Salisbury and East Middlebury. And he's told me, Ruth, I collected enough during the pandemic that I could buy myself a gun safe. And I said, Henry, that is a win-win. You're keeping your gun safe and you're keeping our roadsides clean. He loves this bill, and so do I. And I think that we need to make sure that more people like Henry are able to help keep our roadsides clean, help redeem our bottles. They want us to figure this out. He sent me and the senators and the Senate Natural Resources Committee a photo of himself with the bottles and cans he'd collected tied to the back of his new electric bike that his daughter had bought him so he could cover more ground. So this bill does not remind me of systems and complexities. This bill reminds me of Henry, and I hope that the people, that my colleagues will pass this bill today to make it easier for people like Henry to collect bottles and cans, to keep our roadsides clean, to save our natural resources, and to reduce our carbon footprint. Thank you, Madam President.
The senator from Washington is recognized, and then I'll recognize the senator from Addison.
Thank you, Madam President. I guess I would like to interrogate the proposal.
You may.
Madam President, the senator from Orange has confused me. I don't think it's the first time that's happened. But right now, and if the senator from Franklin only has to drive 3 miles to return his bottles, I have to drive to the city of Barry. And that entire city of Montpelier pretty much has to drive to the city of Barry. And right now, I can take a large number of bottles out and put them at the end of my driveway, and I just push the trash cart out. That same big truck's going to come down my road. But where the senator confused me is I put these bottles out right now in my trash to be recycled. They go out in the recycle bin, and they're going to go. And the senator from Orange says, well, a lot of them are going to be found contaminated and unable to be recycled. And so they are going to have to go to the landfill. But I'm going to take those same bottles to Barry, and they're going to be perfectly fine because they're going to get cut up into small pieces and packed on a truck. But what happens to those big, perfect, how did one bottle go in one place to be recycled get to be contaminated and the same bottle getting returned that then gets chopped up? I'm trying to figure out, why does one section go to recycling and the other section goes to the landfill? I thought they all got recycled in the end, and I think that's what I'm finding confusing.
Am I being interrogated, Madam Chair? I don't want to use.
No, sir, I believe that the inquiry is to the reporter of the bill.
Reporter.
Thank you.
I'm trying to find the actual wording in the bill, or the actual input.
The senator from Addison is kindly requested to respond to the question.
So, thanks for the questions. The solid waste system actually is more complicated than usually appreciate. A lot happens behind the scenes. That's always been true. The notion that you have to understand all the operations means like saying you have to be a mechanic if you're going to operate a car. You can operate a car without knowing how to turn on an engine. You can return bottles without needing to know exactly how everything's handled. But the problem that Senator Warren was alluding to, and Senator from Washington is asking about, is that when you, the single stream system ended up combining different types of materials, including, and they ended up being smashed together. So you get contamination between different types of products, cans, glass, and not everything. So when you have contaminated glass, it cannot be turned into, the contamination level is high enough. It can't be used to make more bottles because of that contamination. So you end up with, in some cases, it ends up being landfill. There have been discussions for years about trying to take single-stream glass and find other good uses for it. For instance, if it could be milled to some specification, might be used in a road bed. There's a factory that's talking about being able to produce products with it. But so far, maybe 5 years later, these things have not come to fruition. When you have clean glass, it's always been separated. It's handled as a bottle. It's kept with other bottles. It's not commingled with trash or anything. It's not going through a materials recycling facility. Then those clean bottles have the opportunity to be turned into bottles. And there are facilities in the area that can do that. For instance, in New York, Quebec, Toronto, whereas one of the primary sites that single-stream glass ends up going because it is being less clean, more contaminated, is that it goes down in the Carolinas to be turned into fiberglass. So fiberglass is useful, but it's a downgrade compared to using it again as a glass bottle. And it's a longer trip than to Miami, New York. So that's part of the backstory. Happy to answer more.
Thank you, Madam President. I guess I misunderstood that we were talking about glass. I understand if I don't wash the spaghetti sauce out of the jar, that it has a certain level of contamination. I guess if I put that jar in with my water bottles when they get to single cycle, maybe, depending on how well my dishwasher has washed out that spaghetti sauce, some of it gets on the bottles. But I was wondering about an individual bottle. If I put my water bottles in my recycle bin, they are going out to be recycled. If I take them, the same bottles back, they become clean. I'm just wondering if contamination means that you get, maybe it would help, what is contaminated? Because if I'm putting a wine bottle in the recycle bin, and a wine bottle is getting returned, it's the same bottle unless somebody has spilled something on the outside of it. And do you have any numbers on
probably contamination? We've done a field trip to a materials recycling facility. So materials of all the types of recycling get dumped and then mechanically handled and sorted. And because of the nature of that process, things get broken, machines grind things into smaller pieces. So you end up with this there's a certain amount of sorting and separating that is successful, but not all of it. And so what you end up with is a mixture of different types of materials, some of which is shouldn't be there to begin with, and so it causes contamination. You're talking about food residuals, for instance, being in an unclean jar, etc. So you end up with this mixture of materials and separating out the glass from it and cleaning that glass so that then you can use it as glass again is very difficult and expensive once you've mixed it with all these other materials. So the whole notion is don't mix different materials together. And that's what the bottle bill has the ability to do. Separate out metal, separate out glass, separate out plastic at the time it's delivered into the system. So you end up with higher quality, cleaner materials that have a higher likelihood of being reused as more valuable materials. As glass can become plastic again, glass can come out of the bottle again, and aluminum is one of the most valuable because you can make it back into more cans.
Thank you, Madam President.
I don't know if that's really helps.
I still am thinking about my one water bottle, and I'm not sure how it gets to be, I'm having trouble just understanding crushing everything up. I thought it got recycled or sorted when it was whole. I'm hearing that it all gets crushed up, mixed together, and then it gets recycled and it all gets dirty in the process. I guess part of my learning curve.
Okay. So I want to be careful that I wouldn't want to say it all gets crushed up. I'm saying that in the mechanical handling of things do break, things do mix together. It's an imperfect process, in part because there's a huge volume being moved mechanically through the system. And it's an imperfect system. It handles volume well, but you end up with different types of waste getting all mixed together, because they also, don't forget, they're delivered together. They may well, they could have broken into the truck as they're moved to the site. So contamination happens in the form of different types of materials being mixed together.
The question is, shall the Senate propose to the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy as amended? The senator from Chittenden is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm hearing a lot of confusion, and I have a feeling my friend Senator from Madison County takes walks in the woods and doesn't drive to the woods. He's immediately in the heart of the forest. And I want to just take us back a little bit, if I could, and try to look at this a little bit from a higher level. As I understand, in the 1970s, when the legislature set up the redemption process, they handed it to the industry, and the industry didn't want it. And so they set up a system. I always say it's like a teenager doing a book report. They deliver the book report, but it's maybe not of the highest quality, Madam President. And I think that's the legacy that we're trying to clarify and build upon. We've heard about what happens when you put your recycling in a bin altogether, it goes into a truck, versus redemption. And I would just say, Madam President, I'm glad we're no longer working on Zoom, because my neighbors were treated more than once to me recognizing the sound outside of the recycling truck coming by and being dressed in sweatpants and a jacket and tie, running down the street with my bin because the truck had already gone by. But that's an aside. When I hand the worker my bin and I sheepishly look ridiculous and ask him to deal with my recycling, he throws it in, all of it. And it immediately gets squished into the back, and you wonder sometimes if that truck's gonna explode. And therein, plastic and metal and glass gets crushed together and is not high quality recyclable always. Versus a redemption center where there is either somebody that says Pepsi, Coke, Budweiser, etc., or a machine that reads it and spits into the right bucket. At that point, that bucket gets crushed. So all the Pepsi is together and all of the Budweiser is together. And in that way, you have a better quality recyclable. So that's the difference we're talking about. We've heard confusion about 15 minutes. If senators will read on page 5270, right after we talk about required to drive more than 15 minutes, unless a waiver is granted by the secretary. So surely, if it takes 30 minutes to get to the supermarket, I think we can have some confidence that a waiver would be deserved there. When you think of this in a common sense way, nobody would say, let's treat water bottles different than soda bottles, beer bottles. A bottle is a bottle, and we should be designing a system that guarantees the best quality recycled and the highest level amount of recycling. Simple is better. Madam President, the words may be complicated, the structure of this bill may be complicated, but the outcome is relatively simple. And I hope we will advance this today. Thank you.
The senator from Chittenden is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. I was debating on doing a vote with explanation or speaking, and since I love talking trash, I thought I would just offer some of my commentary now before the vote. I want to say, for many of the same reasons as the senator from Windham and senator from Franklin, I will be voting no on this bill. I'll be voting no because I have walked the Chittenden Solid Waste District zero sort facility, and I've seen how it actually takes that material that was just being described and actually sorts it through a very comprehensive process that goes, it's really quite an experience. I encourage you all to go through it. And my understanding of this bill, and I have this directly from the Chittenden Solid Waste District for clarity from what the presenter of the bill stated, the Chittenden Solid Waste District, who I've spoken to about this bill multiple times, is against this bill. They see this as, in fact, will increase costs for consumers and will not increase our recycling rates in the state, and they provided me lots of documentation on it. I do concede that they are in support of the amendment. If this is going to go forward, they do support getting glass out of the stream in order to separate that because it is more costly to process. But what I would argue is that this is moving us in the wrong direction. I have constituents as well. I love the story from Henry from Salisbury. That is an excellent story, and I know some Henrys as well. I also would reflect on a constituent I have named Tim. And Tim has reached out to me on multiple occasions. Tim lives in a apartment complex, and Tim has to sort these bottles, store them in a space where he doesn't have a lot of room. He doesn't have a lot of room, but he has to store them there, and those cans don't always get the beer out or the liquid out, and they have to do a lot to keep it clean. And then on Saturday mornings, you got to spend the time, you got to lug it into the car, you got to bring it down to you got to use an hour of your time and $4 in gas to get $2 in returns. And that constituent says that the bottle bill worked back then, but that this is moving in the wrong direction. I'd encourage this body to pursue extended producer responsibility, where we assign a cost to the producers that introduce this material into our marketplace based on the cost to actually reclaim and sort the material, similar to what we do with electronic waste. Deposit refund had its day, but I think we're moving in the wrong direction with this bill. And with that, Madam President, I will be voting no.
The question is, shall the Senate propose to the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy as amended? The senator from Essex Orleans is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. My friend from Orange County talked a little bit about trucking, but he didn't leave any numbers for us. He just said trucks going this way and trucks going that way. And actually, years ago, when the Pepsi truck came, the Pepsi man also picked up the empty Pepsi bottles. And they got confused about not having enough room for the empty bottles with still the full bottles that were on the truck. So the distributors decided to go and have a separate truck to pick the bottles up. But that's when it used to cost $2 a mile to run a truck. It was pretty convenient. Well, now to run a truck, it'll cost you $5-6 a mile. Well, I know where I live and how far it is to where the distributors live. It's about 75 miles. And if you multiply that out, because they have to get paid to come up to pick up the empties to take back, you're going to get somewhere between $750 and $1,000 into transporting these empty bottles from one end of the state halfway, not even halfway back. So the way I look at this bill, it's going to cost the people that elect me to come here and represent them a lot of money, because somebody's going to pay the bill. And usually the bill is the consumer. And so I think this bill could be better put together. I do the recycling at my house. I take my stuff every 2 weeks, my bottles and my cans and few beer bottles now and then if I have company. But it all gets taken to the recycle, or it gets taken out to Mike Marcotte's store for the redemption of the bottles. And no, we don't have fancy zero sort stuff and all these things that some of you folks are lucky to have, I guess. But they tell me that the Orleans County, our district up there, has more recyclable stuff than any other part of the state on a per capita basis, that we're #1 up there on recycling. And so I'm pretty proud of the Northeast Kingdom and what we do, and I'm concerned that my constituents are going to have to pay a lot more money if this bill goes through.
The question is, shall the Senate propose to the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy as amended? Are you ready for the question? The senator from Addison is recognized. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. I think there's been a bit of, maybe it's attributable to my ill health, or I'm not speaking clearly enough. So let me try a little more. But there are concerns about costs. There are already costs in the current system. Somehow everyone is discussing this as though it was free to have everything picked up at your home. I can assure you, no hauler is doing this out of the goodness of their hearts. You're paying right now for the services. The trucks that are traveling all over the county, all over the state, are delivering materials to the north, for instance, these are the same kinds of trucks that will be moving other materials. So in terms of trucking, I don't think people should assume that, well, we're not using trucking now, and now we're going to use a lot more trucking. As a matter of fact, because the more modern centers have the capacity to shred and compact, we're seeing opportunities to send much more material on a single truck than the current system allows. The other thing is, if you look at jurisdictions outside of Vermont where programs like this are being operated, they have found economies of scale, and particularly through some of the modernization and the volume that's going on. There was a proposal that we should move to extended producer responsibility, which is another name for exactly what this program is. The producers of the beverages that are being served to us have a responsibility through this bill. They must become part of a producer responsibility organization or one state's creation. And then that responsibility, they have an obligation to deal with the waste they are creating. So if you are looking for a producer responsibility program, you have found one, and it's this one. As for the notion that Rube Goldberg designed this, I'd say the Rube Goldberg system is the one we currently have, not the one that will be developed under the bill. For instance, when we were in the Berry Redemption Center, I mentioned they handle each bottle 6 times. That's prior to a laborious process that takes 6 hours to load empties onto the truck that comes for them. As opposed to the more modern system, which is shredding and sorting, putting things using day boards that can be loaded with a forklift into a truck and shipping hundreds of thousands of bottles out in compacted form. So I just conclude by saying the bottle system we have now is a 20th century system. We're living in a new century. Things are changing. Let me bring in one other thing. We have a big today. People worry about law. Who's going to bring policy to Vermont from another state that shouldn't be here because they weren't purchasing Vermont? Once you have a barcode, then you can sort by barcode and reject the fraudulent containers that are brought into the state. So it's actually an improvement over the current system, which has no ability to distinguish the same bottle of soda bought in New Hampshire versus in Vermont. On issue after issue, the ability of producer responsibility organization to modernize and handle things efficiently is far better than the current system. And I'll say one last thing. Right now, single stream, yes, it is convenient, but there's no reason to think that the new system will be any less convenient because there is an open door through this stakeholder process. Every entity that's in the current solid waste system has the opportunity to participate in whatever way it sees fit. It might be that someone who's hauling now in the single stream world would say, you know, I'm going to put out a second bin just for bottles with deposits. And I'm going to keep those non-crushed and bring them, and that'll be a second business on top of my waste and a business. So if you only look at this bill and the opportunity to head through the window of exactly how it behaves today, you are missing an opportunity to be part of an enhanced system that, again, the evidence from other jurisdictions with it suggests that it will be more efficient, higher performing, and deliver better results for the state of Vermont and Vermonters. We may be talking about how this has saved Vermonters money rather than cost them money. Thank you, Madam President.
The question is, shall the Senate propose to the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy as amended? Are you ready for the question?
Roll call, please.
The senator from Essex Orleans has requested a roll call vote, and the senator from Orange is recognized. This is the second time you're speaking.
Okay. Madam President, some of the opponents of this bill are people who make a living trucking, single sort, long distances when they wouldn't have to. And this bill will use fewer trucks and fewer truck mileages if passed. I already said that, but my real reason for standing up is that the senator from Washington who puts her materials out on the front yard, I will bet, has never had a bottle deemed contaminated. So, as have most people. It's the folks that mix it together, send it out, that cost more money, and we can help them do a better job. Thank you, Madam President.
The question is, shall the Senate propose to the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy as amended? The senator from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. I think I'd like to ask a question of the reporter, if that's okay.
You may.
I think that, Madam President, when we start thinking about expanding the bottle bill, most of us think about expanding it to cover more types of bottles. Particularly, we talk about the water bottles that didn't exist 50 years ago when we first had the bottle bill. And I guess my question is, what brought us from the desire to expand to other kinds of bottles or containers, not just bottles, but aluminum cans as well, to a system that now everybody feels is complicated and expensive? I mean, what would be the downside of simply expanding the bottle bill to cover more types of containers? How did the desire to expand it to cover containers result in this bill? Which I support, don't get me wrong, but people are finding it complicated and difficult. And I'm wondering whether there's some ways to not go quite so far in this direction.
Thank you for that question. So I honestly do not think it is complicated. We run expanded producer responsibilities in the state of Vermont, which operating, the mechanics of them are behind the scenes. I don't know. I doubt many of the people in the room know exactly how their batteries are handled when they're replaced, how their paint is handled when it's dropped off in the program, where their mercury-containing light bulbs go, exactly how their electronic waste is managed. The point is that we create a system that allows people to put those materials into a stream, into a management system that maximizes their value in terms of recyclability and minimizes the environmental damage that they can cause through, for instance, toxins, as well as reduces the amount of material that just ends up getting landfilled because it's become trash. So I would ask them to consider not necessarily to work out all the details of the system that is being developed in order to look at the bottle. I don't know if it will look or feel very different to people currently, using the current bottle bill. We're just going to bring more materials into. The reason we propose the changes is because when we examined logistics were the main driver of this. We were talking to the stakeholders in this entire system, and they said, you know what, even if we wanted to bring in all these other materials, the current system will break. We have no capacity. We'll have too much material coming into a center without the ability to sort it, without the room to sort it. And we already have centers, comprehension centers, that are seeing on weekends, for instance, down in Bennington, an hour and a half wait. In Middlebury, a 2-hour wait. Some of us talking in Berry, they had a 45-minute wait. Even dedicated citizens don't want to be waiting 45 minutes, much less 2 hours, to turn in their emails. So we see this as a system that is in current ways already failing. And that's why we're looking to improve the mechanics, logistics, behind the scenes, transparently to end users, handle bottles and containers more efficiently, more effectively, more cheaply, so that they can just be better for the state of Vermont.
So this proposal is also one that looks at producer responsibility the way we have with other products like mercury lamps and bulbs and things of that sort. Sort of designed by the industry to meet their needs, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. I mean, we need to meet their needs if they're going to continue to recycle.
So I'm not sure I caught the question in there.
Well, this is a producer responsibility program.
Correct.
Like we have
to create the containers will have a responsibility. Well, I should say those container beverages that are sold have a responsibility to deal with containers once those beverages have been consumed.
My understanding is that the can people, whatever they are, the people who make aluminum cans, and the plastic people and the glass people have said that having deposits, redemption and deposits is the best way for them to regain control over those products and be able to recycle them more.
When the producer, when the company creating a container that's becoming a challenge to manage, and when it's on the waste side of its lifespan, they're the ones who, when it becomes a cost to them, you can't address it. It motivates them to figure out how to minimize those costs. This is going straight to attack something at its source, as opposed to just sort of cleaning up the mess after the fact without the responsible parties involved. So I think you may have noticed that packaging has changed significantly in the last several years, where styrofoam, which we outlawed, is no longer in containers and people are using just corrugated materials with sort of clever ways of folding it in order to create the kind of protections for things being shipped. So what they're going to end up doing is creating much more environmentally friendly packaging by virtue of having the responsibility to deal with it and the role. It's the very same thing for beverages and containers.
Thank you. Madam President, just as an aside, I don't usually tell stories like this, but when I was first elected many years ago, the first bill I introduced was a bill to expand the bottle bill. That was about 12 years ago, and we've been talking about it ever since. We've made slight little bits of progress. So maybe, since I'm about to leave the Senate, and maybe it'd be a nice thing for all of you to like support this bill. First bill I introduced, it on the way out the door. But in all seriousness, I think that we know that the bottle bill is a very popular environmental program in the state of Vermont. It's a little bit, almost as popular as mom and apple pie. And I think, we're grappling with how to expand it and make it better. I don't think any of us would say we oppose the bottle bill, but taking this next step is tricky for some of us because it's a different kind of commitment. I just hope that people will support the bill and help me be able to say that I introduced the bill 12 years ago and got it passed. 12 years, persistence is important. Thank you, Madam President.
The question is, shall the Senate propose to the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy as amended? The senator from Caledonia is recognized.
Madam President, I'm cognizant of the time and I will be short, but since I signed on to that bill with the senator from Washington County way back when, I thought some of the folks who weren't here at that time might enjoy a little story. Because as a trial lawyer, I often use props when I am dealing with a case. And despite the words from my colleague from Franklin about him walking along his property and not finding water bottles, I decided to take a short walk on Airport Road up here in Barrie. In the span of about 300 yards, my wife and I managed to collect 2 very large garbage bags of water bottles, and we brought them into the Senate chamber and had the pages pass them out to each senator. I think from that moment forward, the senator from Colchester Grand Isle has sort of looked at me cross-eyed ever since. The nutshell is I supported that bill at that time because it was a very simple attempt to expand the scope of the deposits. This is not what this bill does. This bill leaves me scratching my head wondering the same question the senator from Washington posed. How did we get to this point? And I completely agree with the senator from Franklin that we have gone way overboard creating a solution to a situation that was so easy to look at that time. And by the way, for you newbies, the Senate secretary will yell at you if you end up trying to use props in speeches. It was not something I found written down anywhere when I was introduced to the Senate. I think I have that. But I'm sorry to see that this has become so complicated. The words of the proponent are ringing in my ears right now. He asked us not to vote against something that was a system still being completed. And that troubles me deeply. I think we have a responsibility to know what the system is before we commit our citizens. Thank you, Madam President.
Question is, shall the Senate propose to the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy as amended? And again, the senator from Essex Orleans has requested a roll call vote. The senator from Bennington is recognized.
President, I just want to be clear on this vote. If we voted not to adopt the Natural Resources Committee amendment, we would then be voting for the House amendment. Am I correct?
You've already voted to adopt the amendment offered by the senator from Addison. Now is on the full proposal of amendment from the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy as amended.
So he's asking.
If this amendment were to be defeated, we would be left with the bill.
As it came from the House.
Then there'd be another question. Then the question would be, shall the bill be read a third time,
Right.
which could, but.
Right, and the final question would therefore be, shall the bill be read a third time? So it's either returning to the House bill, adopting the Senate proposal of amendment as amended, and either way, moving to shall the bill be read a third time?
The vote on the bill, but I don't want to vote up to support I'd rather support the committee's amendment. I think it would be better. And now I have to rush to get my wife these.
The senator from Addison is recognized.
So I thank the senior senator from Bennington for reminding us. Again, the reason we propose modifications to the current model bill, I'm not sure why it strikes people as an entirely new and complicated system. As it may, the current House bill simply takes the current system, which I've already noted is under strain. I could enumerate other problems with it. For instance, pickups of empty containers that are too far apart so that redemption centers have to actually shut down because they run out of storage space. For retailers who refuse to take containers anymore because the pickups are so infrequent that they have no space in their store. There's a long list of problems, including those wait times. If you stick with the House version, you will triple the number of bottles and containers moving through that system that is already on the verge of failing in places. And I don't know how that is it may be a more friendly story to be able to tell your neighbors that you just increased what's in the bottle. But I think you will be creating numerous logistical problems, which is why we work very carefully with stakeholders to develop a process to be able to handle higher volumes and produce better outcomes. I also want to pause and say that the bill does not become fully live until 2025, during which time with the stakeholders and paying on the producer responsibility organizations are still defined and they operate. As a matter of fact, they operate for 9 months with the old list of the current list of things that are have a deposit on them. It's kind of a training wheels period where no enhanced volume, but they handle the current volume. Once they've got, as I said, their sea legs, they move on to an expanded list in 25. And a year later, then they pick up wine bottles, which have been a problematic part of the system currently. So it's an orderly unfolding through an orderly process that involves all stakeholders. I would note that including, I have emails from southeastern Vermont, from the solid waste district in Rattleville, as well as one of the largest redemption centers in that part of the state, all urging us to move forward with this amendment in the bill as amended. So it may seem more complicated than people would like, but I think a well-designed system will, that complexity will be behind the scenes, and the system will be more user-friendly than the current system.
The question is, shall the Senate propose to the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy as amended? The senator from Essex Orleans is recognized.
Madam President, I'd like to withdraw my roll call request for the amendments.
The request for a roll call vote has been withdrawn. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed, nay. No. Division? I'm going to kindly request a division. I'll ask first all those in favor to please stand. You may be seated. Just a moment, please.
Second. There's 10 on this. Come again.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we can.
You may be seated. Nay, please stand. Please listen to the results of the division. The yeas 17, the nays 11, and you have proposed to the House to amend the bill as recommended by the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy as amended. The question now is, shall the bill be read for the third time?
Roll call, please.
The senator from Essex Orleans has now requested a roll call vote. Are you ready for the question? And the question is, shall the bill be read for the third time? The secretary is kindly asked to call the roll.
Senator Ballant.
Yes.
Senator Baruth.
Yes.
Senator Benning.
No.
Senator Bray.
Yes.
Senator Brock.
No.
Senator Campion.
Yes.
Senator Chittenden.
No.
Senator Clarkson.
Yes.
Senator Collmore.
No.
Senator Cummings.
Yes.
Senator Hardy.
Yes.
Senator Hooker.
Yes.
Senator Ingalls.
No.
Senator Kitchell. Senator Lyons.
Yes.
Senator McDonald.
Yes.
Senator Mazza.
No.
Senator McCormack.
Yes.
Senator Nitka.
No.
Senator Parent.
No.
Senator Pearson.
Yes.
Senator Perschlick.
Yes.
Senator Polina.
Yes.
Senator Ron Hinsdale.
Yes.
Senator Sears. Senator Sirotkin.
Yes.
Senator Starr.
No.
Senator Terenzini.
No.
Senator Westman.
Yes.
Senator White.
No.
Senator Kitchell. Senator Sears.
Please listen to the results of your vote. The yeas 17, the nays 11, and you've ordered third reading of H 175. The senator from Wyndham is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. This time I ask that the rules be suspended and that we message our actions on H 716.
Senator from Wyndham is moved to be suspended and H 706 be messaged to the House forthwith. All those in,
7-1.
I have 760. I don't
I
have
have, yeah, H 716 or S,
Yes.
the one we just said, H 175. I'm sorry. Oh, the senator from Wyndham is recognized.
H 716, an act relating to making miscellaneous changes in education law.
Thank you, Senator. The senator from Wyndham has moved that the rules be suspended and H 716, an act relating to miscellaneous changes in education law, message to the House forthwith. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and you've suspended the rules and message H 716 House forthwith. The senator from Wyndham is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. Pending announcements, I move that the Senate stand in adjournment until 10 a.m. Tomorrow.
The senator from Wyndham has moved that, subject to any announcements, the Senate do adjourn until tomorrow, Wednesday, May 11th at 10 a.m. Are there any announcements? The senator from Washington is recognized.
Madam President, I'd ask the members of Senate Finance and probably the chair of education, if they could just check in with me in finance after the call of the gavel.
Are there any additional announcements? The senator from Chittenden is recognized, and that'll recognize the senator from
Madam
Addison.
President, Senate Economic Development will meet at 8:30 tomorrow morning.
The senator from Addison is recognized.
Madam President, I just want to, I don't know if Senate Natural will need to meet. We've had some bills coming back, and so if members of the committee would please watch for an email. We won't schedule a meeting unless we absolutely need to. Thank you.
Are there any additional announcements? The senator from Wyndham has moved that the Senate adjourn until Wednesday, May 11th at 10 a.m. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it.